Good morning, my name is Amélia Vasconcelos. I'm a third-year student from Nottingham Trent University, and today I'm going to present my dissertation titled Drug Use and Misuse Trends in Older Adults Since 2010, a Review. This dissertation was supervised by Chenier Williams. On the screen right now, you can see the poster I made regarding this presentation. As a starting point, it's important to define what we're actually talking about. So what is a drug? The World Health Organization defines drugs as any substance that can be ingested or otherwise introduced in the body to induce a physiological change. However, for the purposes of this dissertation, we are using the concept of a psychoactive substance. This is the same, but that induces a psychological response. Drug use is the consumption of these substances, while drug misuse implies that the use of these is harmful or hazardous, including alcohol and other illicit drugs. Drug addiction, on the other hand, requires that the individual suffers from a chronic compulsion to seek and consume drug despite any adverse reactions. The definition of older adults is varied and it will be described later, but for this dissertation we are considering anyone over the age of 55 as an older adult. But why does this matter? In the 1960s and 70s, there was a change in the societal perception of drugs and drug addiction. Before, the image of a drug addict used to be a functional housewife that did opiates on the side, whilst from the 1960s we started perceiving them as dangerous individuals, and they were even described as the walking dead. From the 1960s and 70s then, there was a big surge in drug research, both for its risks and possible benefits. However, this was always targeted to the young consumer, the 18 to 24-year-olds. This generation at the time was what we now call baby boomers, those born between 1946 and 1964. Baby boomers today are all older adults. Older adults have a different metabolism, thus they metabolize drugs differently, which makes them vulnerable to longer exposure times and unexpected adverse reactions, particularly when drugs are combined, which is very usual in this demographic. Thus, they are susceptible to misdiagnosis and hidden effects of both licit and illicit drugs. Additionally, drug addiction signs manifest differently in older adults than their younger counterparts. In this literature review, I aim to cross-examine the field of drug research with publicly available reports to discuss trends amongst older adults. This is of particular interest in forensic science for resource management and public health concerns. To conduct this review, I compiled data from the national reports of several countries. In order to make the playing field even, I decided to choose countries with similar technological development, particularly where it comes to toxicology sample analysis and data collection methods. Because of that, I chose to analyze data from the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, and EU. The latter is represented by the EMCDDA, which is the European Monitoring Centre for Drug and Drug Addiction. I used the national reports from these countries since 2010. To compare it to case files and independent research, I used PubMed and Elsevier as my main datasets with the keywords that you can see on the screen. All national health statistics and/or drug departments were contacted over the data collection methods, but none of them replied. Additionally, I also contacted some police forces, hospitals, and addiction recovery centers. But why older adults? As of 2020, the population over 6 years old outnumbered those aged under 5, which means that we are faced with an aging society that's getting older and older by the day. This demographic is the one diagnosed with the most health conditions and also the one that is prescribed the most illicit drugs. However, they have different drug pharmacokinetics, which means they metabolize drugs differently, which exposes them to their effects longer and may lead to unexpected or heightened effects. Because they react differently to drugs, there is a gap in understanding of how prescriptions should be given to older adults. Additionally, the textbook signs of addiction disorders don't manifest the same way in older adults as they do in their younger counterparts, which means they are more susceptible to misdiagnosing of these. Although there is no strict definition for older adults, I decided to use the age of 55 as the threshold. Whilst the World Health Organization defines those aged over 6 years older adults, the British NHS encompassed everyone only from the age of 65. I decided to go a bit lower with 55 to encompass the delayed effects of the cultural shift in drug perception in countries other than the UK and the US. The 1960s and 70s are defined by researchers as the age of exploration. These were marked by the flower power movement in the US, which really normalized psychedelic drugs, and also the heroin epidemic in the UK. These events really changed societal's perception on drug use and normalized it in popular media. With this came a surge in drug research, both for its risks and possible benefits. The generation most affected by these were the ones who were adolescents and young adults at this time, which were the baby boomers. Currently, all baby boomers are considered older adults by our definition. In 2010, the oldest baby boomers reached the age of 65, making them considered older adults by the strictest definition. As you can see on screen, the Office of National Statistics of England and Wales has recorded an increase in illicit drug use for older adults, while the opposite occurred for those aged under 25. This means that the current anti-drug campaigns are working for the younger population while they are failing the older adults. Meanwhile, in Scotland, drug-related deaths have significantly decreased since 2020, except for those aged over 55. As you can see in the graph, this is the only group where this phenomenon has occurred. But why have we not heard about this issue in popular media? My belief is that the data collection methods in these countries is lacking. Starting with the EMCDDA, which is a collection of countries. Although they do have a universal data collection method, this is not adhered to by each country, which makes it a bit redundant. Also, their data collection method has an upper limit, which means that they fully exclude adults over 65. Similarly, England and Wales has an upper limit at 60 years old, which means that they are fully excluding older adults by their own NHS definition. Conversely, despite the fact that Canada does carry out a fairly comprehensive drug survey to its population, it only discriminates it between adults over or under 25, which means that all of those people over 25 may be 26 or 86, and they are bundled up together in their reports. Additionally, Scotland doesn't even carry out a drug survey, they only account for drug-related deaths. All of the other countries have better data collection methods for the older population, as you can see in Table 2. Ideally, these surveys would discriminate the population into small age groups with no upper limit. This way, no older adult would be unaccounted for. Moving on to the analysis of each drug in particular, we are now looking at cocaine. As you can see on the graphs, there is a clear increase on older adults consuming powder cocaine, both in England and Wales, which you can see on your left, as in the USA, which you can see on your right. Researchers and case studies point to two main causes for the under and misdiagnosing of cocaine addiction disorders in this population. Firstly, highlighted by a case in a hospital in Barcelona, there is a lack of suspicion from doctors and other medical personnel to suspect that older adults are consuming cocaine at all. Another big issue is that the common signs of cocaine addiction disorders are often disregarded as just signs of aging, as these might be very similar. However, factors such as cognitive and physical decline, loss of employment, and social isolation are all clear-cut signs of cocaine addiction or any other drug addiction. However, older adults just get misdiagnosed with other illnesses as chronic pain or just loneliness from age. Furthermore, as a clear consequence of the failing drug action in older adults, there is a stark increase in cocaine-related deaths, both in England and Wales on your left and Scotland on your right. The risks of misuse of benzodiazepines include tripping, falling, memory loss, and delirium, all of which older adults are more vulnerable to. SAMHSA in the USA describes benzodiazepine misuse as self-prescription and/or usage above or in different circumstances to those prescribed. As you can see in the graph, the data is hard to interpret, but it does show that the older generation has a slight increase in the misuse of benzodiazepines. However, when we look at the overall reports, only 3 out of the 7 mention benzodiazepines as drugs of abuse, which means that these might not be regarded as dangerous as they really are. When looking at the benzodiazepine-related deaths, however, we can clearly see that these are becoming a much bigger issue each year that comes. In England and left and Scotland on the right, we can see that benzodiazepine-related deaths are on the rise in older adults since 2010. Just like the last drug group, opioids are very commonly prescribed to older adults. These are common for chronic pain disorders, and just like benzodiazepines, are highly addictive and can cause withdrawal symptoms. Because of the slowed metabolism of older adults, they are exposed to these drugs for longer, causing unexpected and heightened side effects, particularly when combined with other opioids or even other drugs such as benzodiazepines, which is very common in this demographic. Additionally, because they are addictive, after the treatment ceases, it's not uncommon to see patients seeking illicit opioids such as heroin to replace the drug. Although opioid misuse is very rarely reported by older adults, this is the age demographic that most reports to hospitals with opioid-related accidents. In Europe, the average age of a patient reporting to addiction recovery centers is increasing. Also, similarly to the last graph, we can see that in the USA, older adults are reporting increasing rates of opioid misuse. For a little change, although England and Wales still reported a high increase in opioid-related deaths in older adults, I am showing you the Scottish data as well as the Australian ones. Similarly to all of the other drug groups, you can see that the opioid-related deaths in older adults has been increasing since 2010. And last but not the least, cannabis. Cannabis is by far the most popular illicit drug and second most popular drug, only surpassed with alcohol. It is undeniable that the use of cannabis, both medically and recreationally, has increased in all of the countries analyzed. This may be due to the increased research on its possible benefits, as well as its popularization in media. Although it can help alleviate symptoms of chronic pain, fatigue, and a lot of mental health issues, self-medication with cannabis can be very dangerous, and it is highly associated with mental and motor impairment. I did not include cannabis-related deaths in this report, since all of the sources that report them do not specify what a cannabis-related death is, since a lot of deaths are considered cannabis-related, whilst the individuals died from other causes whilst having cannabis in their system. However, I must still highlight the importance of studying the risks of cannabis consumption in older generations, so these individuals can make an informed decision when deciding to use the drug. So what can we conclude from all this? Firstly, it is undeniable that older generations are using and misusing drugs at increasing rates, which also reflects in drug-related deaths in this age range. Also, the little age group discrimination or outright exclusion of this age group from drug surveys hinders the identification of this trend, and that makes it so there is an institutional lack of emphasis on the issue. So with this review, I aim to highlight this gap in knowledge, which puts older adults in a vulnerable position to disinformed drug use, misdiagnosing, and untargeted drug recovery programs. What can we do to fix this problem? In the future, more detailed drug surveys that would target the older population could help identify this trend further. Also, Clinical trials and research would help understand how an older metabolism digests these drugs and their effects. Regarding addiction disorders, I would suggest the development of medical protocols to avoid overprescription and to tackle the issue of polypharmacy, as well as targeted addiction diagnosis and treatment programs that fits the need of an aging and older population. Thanks so much for listening to my presentation. I will be available for any questions.